I don't know when it started, but I began seeing live comments floating in front of my eyes. In their words, I'm the male lead of a tragic romance novel. Because of the meddling of my wife's little assistant, my parents and younger sister all died horribly, and I ended up seriously injured and disabled. Then my wife starts regretting it and goes insane trying to win me back. I honestly can't believe any of this is real. After all, life isn't a novel. Besides, don't they think it's ridiculous to cast a combat coach as a tragic romance male lead? What do they mean I got my hands pinned down by some scheming, pretentious male side character, and I'm crying with red eyes? I could fucking knock him out with one punch and send him straight to see his ancestors. Alright, Chapter 1. Watching everything unfolding in the living room, I pressed my fingers against my brow. Even now, I still hadn't fully recovered from the shock. It had actually happened. My wife, Gabriella, was standing in front of the sofa in a tailored business suit, her face cold and unreadable. My mother, still holding a plate of freshly cut fruit, looked utterly confused and stunned. Mom, if you're short on money or you saw something you liked, you could have just told me, Gabriella said flatly, her tone carrying a kind of condescending scrutiny. There was no need to directly take things from my company-owned mall. When Emilio was reconciling the accounts today, he saw that several $100,000 charge on the tab. He was so startled he didn't even dare report it to me right away. He thought someone under him had been embezzling funds. Because of this, he was upset the entire afternoon in the finance office and even skipped lunch, afraid I'd be caught in an awkward position. Hearing this, I didn't feel anger at all. Instead, I was hit by an absurd sense of unreality, because just half an hour earlier, a line of golden text had floated in front of my eyes out of nowhere. It looked exactly like the comment overlays you'd see on a video site. It clearly predicted that Gabriella, after being influenced by a few words from her assistant Emilio, would come home and put on a cold face toward my mother, accusing her of being greedy for her money. At first, I thought I was just hallucinating from exhaustion. I had been training athletes for competition lately, pulling too many all-nighters. After all, something like this, something supernatural, had no scientific explanation. It only existed in novels, where people could see live commentary. I tried to speak up and warn my mother, or call Gabriella to confront her, but something strange happened. The moment I tried to reveal what those words were, my throat felt as if it had been sealed with concrete. Not a single sound would come out, as if some unseen rule was warning me, spoilers were not allowed. And those words didn't just predict today's ridiculous scene, they also laid out my entire future. According to them, I was the male protagonist in a tragic novel. In the future, Gabriella would do a series of utterly outrageous things for her soft-spoken, delicate little assistant. She would force me to kneel, and even cause my parents and sister to die tragically, and I would eventually be crippled in an accident, my limbs broken beyond repair. Only at the very end would she realize everything and spend the rest of her life drowning in regret. I lowered my gaze to my own hands covered in calluses from years of striking heavy bags. This world felt completely insane. Was this really the kind of ending you got just for living inside a novel? Hugh, 1 meter 85 tall, 85 kilograms, maintaining an extremely low body fat percentage year-round. Not only the owner of a large mixed martial arts gym, but also a professional coach with competitive fighting awards. And yet those words told me that in the future, because of Gabriella's favoritism, I would be pinned down by that so-called pretentious coquette of a male assistant, grabbed by the wrists, slammed against a wall, eyes red, crying while enduring silently. I could fucking knock him out with one punch and send him straight to see his ancestors. Alright, and yet, absurd as it sounded, this ridiculous script was already playing out right in front of me. The cause was laughably trivial. Today, my mother had gone shopping and accidentally taken the wrong bag when she left the house, so she didn't bring her usual payment card. She happened to walk into a high-end mall owned by Gabriella's company and took a liking to a necklace. The store manager recognized her as the boss's mother-in-law and refused to let her leave to get the money. He insisted on charging it to the company account first and settling it at the end of the month. My mother thought it was all family business anyway and that my sister could just transfer the money back later, so she didn't insist, and that was it. All it took was Emilio, Gabriella's assistant, pretending to wipe away a few tears in front of her, saying he didn't know how to process the accounting entry, and suddenly my mother, the rightful matriarch of the Liu family, the woman who once saved Gabriella's company from a broken cash flow crisis by injecting tens of millions without blinking an eye, had become a greedy, poor old woman trying to swindle a few $100,000 worth of jewelry from her daughter-in-law. Chapter 2. Gabriella, what exactly do you mean by that? My mother placed the fruit plate on the coffee table. The smile on her face faded, and her tone turned cold. I already had Isabella transfer the payment for that necklace to your mall's corporate account. How did it turn into me taking something for free from you? Gabriella frowned, as if she thought my mother was just making excuses. she sighed, her tone carrying a hint of impatience. Mom, it's not about the money. I'm just saying there was no need to make things so difficult for Emilio. He's only an assistant, he's timid. Gabriella. I couldn't listen any further. I stepped forward and stood between them. My tall, heavily built frame completely blocked my mother from Gabriella's view. Looking down at my wife of many years, my gaze was cold as ice. I don't know whether your little assistant is timid or not, I said flatly, but I can see your courage is getting bigger and bigger. Gabriella froze for a moment. It seemed she hadn't expected me to flare up like this in front of my mother, but even then, she still didn't think she was in the wrong. Frowning, she tried to argue back. Hugh, can you stop speaking like that? So sharp, so aggressive. I never said Mom did anything wrong, but the way things were handled really wasn't appropriate. It puts people below in a difficult position. I let out a cold laugh and cut her off without hesitation. So what? Just because of one outsider's words, just because of a bit of their fragile little emotions. You come back into this house and show my mother that attitude in front of me. Gabriella, who exactly gave you the right? Is your little assistant's feelings more important than the sky itself? Gabriella's face turned pale. She opened her mouth, about to speak. I stepped closer, pressing down on her presence with my height and gaze. Our Liu family may not be as powerful in the spotlight as your company CEO position right now, but we've never depended on your charity to survive. When your company's capital chain broke and you were on the verge of collapse, it was my mother who wrote a 50 million check overnight to plug that hole for you. Not to mention today, it's just a necklace worth a few $100,000. Even if my mother liked that store and took everything inside, you should still respectfully pack it up and send it over. Especially since my sister already transferred the money to your corporate account. And now you come back here with this whole interrogation act. What exactly are you trying to do? I narrowed my eyes and stared straight at her shocked face. Word by word, cheating, and looking for an excuse to get a divorce. The moment the word cheating came out, Gabriella was completely stunned. A flash of panic and embarrassment crossed her face, and her gaze started to waver. What nonsense are you talking about? I never. She bit her lip. Her earlier confidence vanished without a trace, and her entire momentum collapsed. I was a bit stressed at work earlier. Next time I'll be more careful. Seeing the atmosphere frozen to the extreme, my mother sighed and walked over, gently tugging at my arm, although she was still unhappy. She didn't want to see us husband and wife escalate things over something like this. All right, enough, she said softly. Say less. If it's just a misunderstanding, then let's clear it up. We're family. Don't let outsiders ruin our harmony. Gabriella took the step down. She gave me a complicated look, as if she still hadn't adjusted to my unusually firm attitude today. In the end, she said nothing. She turned and went back upstairs to the bedroom. I glanced at her slightly disheveled back and let out a cold snort. I was just about to go pour myself a glass of water to clear my throat. Then, suddenly, another wave of golden text floated across my vision. What the hell? Isn't the plot going off track? This direction is wrong, right? Isn't the male lead supposed to just smooth things over? Exactly. In the original story, he was extremely tolerant of Gabriella's emotions. According to the script, he should have made his mom apologize to that little assistant, then go sulk on the balcony smoking in silence. Why did the male lead suddenly learn to speak, and why is he so tough now? If you ask me, the author must have been forced to change the plot after getting roasted. Having the mom apologize to a pretentious coquette assistant isn't something a normal human brain would come up with. Wrong. Only a human brain would write something that stupid. AI is just too logical. Looking at those dense floating comments, I actually laughed in anger. Smooth things over? Be extremely tolerant? Make my mom apologize to some pretentious coquette assistant? Seriously, why do they keep treating me like some tragic romance male lead? Do I really look like a simp or what? Chapter 3. Late at night, I lay on the large bed in the bedroom, my hands resting behind my head, staring at the ceiling. I began to seriously reflect. Had I really, in the past, acted like a man with no boundaries, some hopeless simp? Otherwise, how could those damn floating comments have decided I was the male lead of a tragic novel? Thinking about it carefully, my past with Gabriella clearly wasn't like that. We met 5 years ago. Back then, she had just taken over her family's company. Under so much pressure she couldn't sleep at night. To vent her emotions, she came to my fighting gym in the middle of the night. She punched the heavy bag wildly and without any structure at all. In the end, she didn't even relieve her stress, she just sprained her wrist instead. As the owner, I couldn't stand watching that kind of self-destructive technique. I walked over with an ice pack and forcibly pulled her hand over to treat the swelling. She looked at me like a bristling hedgehog, eyes red as she glared at me. Tears were already spinning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall, stubborn to the extreme. At that moment, I admit, I was moved. Later, I became her private coach. I taught her how to generate power, how to throw a proper punch, and naturally, I entered her life. Those days when we were in love were truly sweet. After my intense sparring sessions, she would carefully apply medicinal alcohol to my bruises, tears falling as she gently massaged me, and when she stayed up late reviewing financial reports, I would pull her into my arms and use professional massage techniques to relieve the stiffness in her neck. I had never been interested in boring corporate management since childhood. I only liked fighting and boxing, so I handed over all family business matters to my sister, Isabella, but I loved Gabriella, so at home, I almost never stopped talking about how good she was. Through my connections, my sister's company secured many deep partnerships with Gabriella's firm. Even my father, who was notoriously strict, praised Gabriella's decisiveness in the business world. My parents had long since treated her as someone closer than a biological daughter. It was precisely because of this foundation, this unconditional trust, that when her company's capital chain broke and she was on the verge of collapse, my parents didn't hesitate to inject $50 million in cash to stabilize her situation. Our entire family had been loving her, supporting her, lifting her up with complete sincerity. And now, what has this woman become? Has she really been cursed or something? Or is it that once this so-called gender-flipped tragic romance script starts, it forcibly strips the character of intelligence just so she can perform a stupidity-driven plot? I turned over irritably and switched off the bedside lamp. I really couldn't make sense of it, but I've never been the type to sit around spiraling. Instead of lying here guessing endlessly, it's better to take action. Tomorrow, I'll go to her company. I want to see for myself what kind of monster that so-called pretentious coquette assistant is, to be able to bewitch a high-powered female CEO into losing all sense of judgment. Chapter 4. The next morning, I drove to the company building where Gabriella worked. I parked outside and walked straight into the lobby, heading directly for the private CEO elevator. Just as I was about to step in, a hand blocked my way. "Sorry, sir, this is the CEO's exclusive elevator." I stopped and tilted my head to look at the person in front of me. "You think I don't know that?" He frowned, a hint of superiority creeping into his tone. "Since you know, why are you still trying to get in?" I narrowed my eyes and studied him from head to toe. A ridiculous feeling rose in my chest. It was like walking down the street and suddenly having your head forced into some low-IQ melodramatic plotline. The man in front of me was thin, almost fragile-looking. The branded suit on him hung loosely, as if it had been thrown on carelessly. His shoulders couldn't even properly fill it out. He looked like a kid wearing an adult's clothes. That helpless, pretentious look. He was probably the so-called pretentious coquette assistant, Emilio. I couldn't help but scoff inwardly. Gabriella's taste in hiring people really was getting worse and worse. I didn't bother wasting words with him. I shoved one hand into my pocket and said flatly, "I'm here to see my wife, Gabriella. So tell me, assistant, can I take this elevator or not?" At the word wife, Emilio's eyes flickered noticeably, but instead of stepping aside, he straightened his thin back even more and said confidently, "Sorry, company rules. This elevator is off limits to anyone except the CEO. Only the boss Gabriella and us close assistants are allowed to use it." He deliberately emphasized the words close assistants. There was a hidden provocation in his eyes, as if he was flaunting some unspeakable privilege in front of me. After hearing that, I almost laughed out loud from anger. In this day and age, even a tea-serving assistant thinks he can wield authority like a decree, and now he's here trying to assert dominance in front of me. I didn't even feel like arguing with him. I simply took out my phone and called Gabriella. It rang twice before she picked up. Before she could even speak, I cut in coldly. "I'm at the CEO elevator on the first floor of your company. You've got 3 minutes to come down and deal with this useless trash who clearly doesn't know his place. Miss it, and don't bother coming." Click. I hung up immediately. The lobby was busy with people coming and going. The commotion naturally drew attention. A few employees nearby were whispering, "Emilio's at it again, acting all high and mighty. I wonder which unlucky guy ran into him this time." No idea. Probably some clueless business partner messing with Emilio. He's going to get wrecked. At that moment, a junior administrative girl walking past with a coffee stopped in her tracks. The moment she saw my face, she inhaled sharply. After hearing her colleague's comments, she rolled her eyes and let out a cold laugh under her breath. "Unlucky guy. I think Emilio's the one who's about to get kicked out." The others clearly didn't believe her. "Come on, you know how much Gabriella favors Emilio. Last time a department head just questioned his arrangement, she publicly reprimanded the manager and backed Emilio completely. If this guy really talks to Emilio like that, he's definitely finished." The admin girl looked at Emilio with the same gaze you'd use for someone already dead. Then she said quietly, "You guys know who that man is? That's Gabriella's husband." Chapter 5. Before 3 minutes had passed, the private elevator chimed. Ding. Gabriella stepped out in a hurry, her high heels clicking sharply against the floor. She took in the tense standoff in the lobby and frowned, saying nothing. Then she led us straight to the top floor. In the CEO office, I sat in a leather sofa like I owned the place, one arm draped lazily over the backrest. My gaze landed on the man standing behind Gabriella with his head lowered. Emilio, go on. I tilted my chin slightly, my tone dripping with sarcasm. Weren't you pretty bold downstairs? Tell me again about your company rules. Emilio flinched and glanced at Gabriella like a wronged child seeking protection. In a pitiful voice, he said, CEO, I was only strictly following the rules you set. I didn't know your husband would react so strongly. Gabriella sighed, clearly trying to smooth things over. Hugh, don't make things difficult for him. That elevator is indeed restricted to executives and close assistants. He just started not long ago. It's normal that he didn't recognize you. Innocent ignorance shouldn't be blamed. I couldn't help but raise my hands and clap lightly. Clap, clap. The crisp sound echoed sharply in the quiet office. I heard your employees talking downstairs and didn't believe it at first. I let out a cold laugh and looked straight at Gabriella. So you're really going to take the blame for him? Tell me, Gabriella, what exactly do you see in someone like him? Gabriella's brows snapped together, her expression turning cold. Hugh, what are you even thinking? Emilio is a top university graduate. I hired him to bring fresh talent into the company. Can you stop imagining things so disgustingly? Emilio's eyes turned red at just the right moment, his voice trembling slightly as he added in a deliberately fragile tone. Sir, if you're unhappy with me, just come at me. Please don't let this affect your relationship with the CEO. I'll resign if that's what you want. The moment his performance landed, another wave of golden text flickered in front of my eyes. Here it comes. Classic scene. Finally the favoritism arc begins. This is exactly the taste. The male lead is definitely about to storm out in anger, and the female lead will go comfort the assistant. Perfect. Quick, quick, let him say, you're choosing him over me. With red eyes, I let out a cold inward laugh as I watched the flood of comments. Storming out. Self-destruction. And just hand this bastard the whole stage. Fine, I said. I withdrew my gaze and looked at Gabriella, my tone calm. Since you've already said he's a top talent from a university and fresh blood for the company, I continued, then today I'd like to see just how impressive this so-called fresh blood really is. Ignoring Gabriella's surprised expression, I stood up directly and left the CEO office. I walked straight to the assistant office next door. I knocked on the door of Gabriella's real chief assistant, Carla. Carla had worked with Gabriella for many years, so she naturally recognized me. When she suddenly saw me, she looked a bit surprised. I pulled out a chair and sat down, getting straight to the point. Carla, give me the truth, I said. How is Emilio really at work? The moment she heard the name, Emilio, Carla's previously professional smile instantly collapsed. She glanced carefully toward the hallway to make sure no one was around, then let out a long sigh. The frustration of a corporate worker completely exploded in that moment. Don't even get me started, it's a complete mess. Carla rubbed her temples in irritation and started venting nonstop. He flips data in reports, and can't even take proper minutes in meetings. When he's assigned to handle clients, the moment he's asked a few questions, he starts crying about how wronged he feels. And in the end, all the mess gets cleaned up by us senior employees. The more she spoke, the angrier she got. She slammed the desk with gritted teeth. If he were at least trying or improving, I could tolerate it. But he has zero strengths, he can't do anything right, and the only thing he's good at is acting like he has backing from above. I honestly don't understand why the CEO is keeping him at all. Chapter 6. I didn't stay long at Carla's place. After leaving, I made a few stops to ask around with some former employees I was still on good terms with. In less than half an hour, I had a clear picture of Emilio's recent work performance and daily attitude. I took the stack of printed documents Carla gave me and pushed open the CEO office door again. Bang. I threw the pile of error-filled reports and poorly formatted documents straight onto the desk. So this is your so-called elite university talent. I braced my hands on the edge of the desk and looked down at Gabriella, my tone full of mockery. Been here a whole month and he still can't even align text to the center without 3 senior employees teaching him step by step. You're paying this useless troublemaker $10,000 a month. My serious question now, Gabriella, you keeping him around, are you planning to cheat on me? The temperature in the room dropped instantly. I didn't give her any chance to interrupt. My expression turned even colder, especially yesterday. Just because of a few words from this useless guy, you went home and gave my mother attitude. Now I want to hear what you're going to do about him. Gabriella's face cycled between pale and flushed as she was hit with my rapid-fire accusations. She looked at the mess on the desk, then at Emilio trembling beside her, and finally lost all composure. She stood up sharply. Hugh, can you stop talking so harshly? I already said yesterday was a misunderstanding. I never meant to give your mom attitude. Why are you so fixated on this? Why are you being so aggressive toward a fresh graduate? Emilio immediately caught the shift in Gabriella's attitude. His eyes reddened again, voice trembling as he launched into his practiced act. Mr. Hugh, please don't be angry at the boss. I'm just too stupid, too slow to learn. I haven't been able to help her enough with work. If you don't like me, I'll leave. Please don't fight with Gabriella because of me. Looking at his nauseating performance, I didn't even want to spare him a second glance. I straightened up, adjusted my sleeves, and looked at Gabriella with a calmness that felt almost dangerous. You're not going to deal with him. Fine. Then get ready to sign the divorce agreement. The moment those words landed, Gabriella froze completely. A flicker of disbelief and panic crossed her eyes. At that moment, another line of golden text floated before my vision. What? The male lead is this ruthless? Weren't we supposed to get the usual red-eyed endurance arc? He just went straight for divorce. This plot is totally broken. Where's the author? This is so satisfying. This is how normal people react. The male lead finally got a brain. Did the damn author get his mother greeted by readers? Did this tragic story just turn into a revenge power fantasy? I ignored the flashing comments in front of me. My eyes were fixed on Gabriella. I spoke word by word, without any hesitation. Gabriella, I told you this a long time ago, before we met. I don't care what kind of person you were, and I would never use your past against you. But after marriage, don't try to challenge my bottom line. After saying that, I left the company. I was afraid that if I stayed any longer, I'd lose control and beat that damn pretentious coquette to a pulp. Chapter 7. After leaving Gabriella's company, I got into my car and started the engine. On the way back, I drove with one hand on the steering wheel, my brows tightly furrowed, still unable to make sense of everything, based on the information those floating bullet comments provided. In the original storyline, my parents and my younger sister were all ultimately killed by this so-called Emilio, but looking at him now, it sounded completely absurd. A man who had only been working for a month and couldn't even properly center a line. A Word document, what kind of earth-shattering scheme could he possibly come up with? What? Was he going to annoy people to death with his disastrous reports? Still, I've never been someone who goes into a fight unprepared. As the saying goes, you don't fear a schemer with ambition, you fear a fool with sudden inspiration. Who knows what a shameless, bottomless, pretentious coquette type like him might do when pushed too far. At a red light, I picked up my phone and called a security company. I ordered them to upgrade all surveillance and security systems at the old family estate that very day. Then I called my younger sister, Isabella. The moment she picked up, I got straight to the point and told her to be careful when going out recently. Isabella let out a cold snort on the other end. Bro, you've noticed something off about that male assistant around Gabriella too, haven't you? I paused. You've seen him? Seen him? That's an understatement. Her voice was full of disgust and disbelief. Last week I went to your sister-in-law's company to negotiate the next quarter's renewal contract. That guy came over carrying 2 cups of hot coffee. He was still 2 meters away from me when he suddenly tripped flat on his face. The boiling coffee almost spilled all over me, and he didn't even try to fix the situation. He just stood there with red eyes apologizing, saying he's clumsy and didn't mean it. Isabella gritted her teeth. I was honestly speechless. If it wasn't for the fact it was your sister-in-law's company and I didn't want to make things awkward for her, I would have pulled that deal right there and then. After listening to my sister's furious rant, I sat in the driver's seat completely speechless, flat on his face, spilling coffee, red-eyed apologies and fake innocence. That guy really had the full, pretentious coquette villain starter pack. I rubbed my temples, unable to stop myself from internally complaining. This world, was it some kind of gender-swapped melodramatic romance novel or what? I lowered the car window slightly, letting the cold air rush in, trying to clear the absurd irritation in my chest. My mind sharpened a little as I reviewed everything again. The trigger may have been that idiot, but according to the bullet comments, it was also me, the version of me in the original storyline. That version of me kept tolerating things, kept compromising, for the sake of the bigger picture, for Gabriella's emotions. I kept stepping back again and again, until it ended in my family destroyed, and myself crippled. I glanced at the rearview mirror at my own sharply defined, cold face. It all felt ridiculous. Why was I supposed to endure all that? What? I'm some mutated turtle living in the New York sewers. Why should I let people climb over my head and still hold back my anger? I did love Gabriella. Yes, I loved the version of her who once fought for her career with stubborn determination and refused to bow to anything. But that never meant I would endlessly accommodate her unreasonable demands, or sacrifice my family's dignity and safety for it. Love requires mutual respect. If she couldn't even distinguish right from wrong, if she couldn't respect the goodwill my family and I showed her, if she allowed an outsider to trample all over my boundaries, then why the hell should I keep humiliating myself for this love? Just so I could end up broken, ruined, and waiting like a fool for the aggressors to shed a few crocodile tears. For some cliché redemption arc? No, I couldn't think about this anymore. My fists tightened. Chapter 8. Evening fell, and night slowly covered the sky. I was sitting on the sofa in the living room, just having poured myself a glass of water. The fingerprint lock at the door chimed. Gabriella pushed the door open and walked in. I set down my glass and was just about to ask her whether she had dealt with that useless man, or decided to sign the divorce papers, when, the next second, a thin figure suddenly slipped out from behind her. It was Emilio. He kept his head down, following behind Gabriella like a frightened bird, even carrying her briefcase. Leaning back on the sofa, I stared at the two of them coldly, then let out a laugh out of anger. So what now? Bringing him home so you can personally teach him how to make PowerPoints? Gabriella changed her shoes, walked over, and placed her bag on the coffee table, speaking with a tone of self-righteous rationality. Hugh, let's each take a step back. She directly announced her decision. Emilio is indeed not suitable for the CEO office right now, but he's a fresh graduate. He has potential. Firing him outright would seriously damage his future career. I've already told HR to reduce his salary and transfer him to another department for training. After hearing that, I didn't even feel angry anymore, only absurdity. So in other words, you're protecting him no matter what. The moment Emilio heard that, he immediately launched into his familiar performance again. His eyes turned red, his voice trembling as he cried out, "Mr. Hugh, please don't force Gabriella. My family is poor. I still have younger siblings in school. My parents are sick. They depend on my salary for medicine. I really need this job. Please don't fire me." Gabriella frowned even deeper as she looked at his pitiful act. She turned to me with mild reproach. "Hugh, do you hear what he just said? Why are you forcing a fresh graduate with such a difficult background into this situation? Can't you just be a little more forgiving?" At that moment, Gabriella's phone suddenly rang. The caller ID showed her assistant Carla. She glanced at it, then walked out to the balcony to take the call. The vast living room was suddenly left with only me and Emilio. The moment Gabriella stepped away, another familiar line of golden text floated in front of my eyes. "Here it comes. Male lead and male assistant alone in the same room." This is usually where the classic framing scene happens. I bet 100% he's going to fake a fall and accuse the male lead. He's definitely going to crash into the coffee table. I crossed my arms and stared coldly at Emilio, who was only a few steps away. As expected, that bastard's expression changed instantly the moment Gabriella went to the balcony. The pitiful look vanished, replaced by a flash of malice. He suddenly took 2 steps back. Then, with full force, he slammed himself hard into a wooden display cabinet. Bang! A heavy impact echoed through the living room. A decorative antique vase shattered on the floor. From the balcony, Gabriella immediately hung up and rushed back in. What happened? Emilio collapsed among the shards of porcelain, clutching his forehead. Tears poured down his face like broken beads. He looked at me in terror, his voice sharp and accusatory, as if he had suffered a grave injustice. "Mr. Hugh, why did you hit me? I already agreed to a salary cut. Why won't you leave me alone?" Fine. I'll resign if that's what you want." Chapter 9. Looking at the shattered porcelain scattered across the floor and Emilio sitting there performing like a man possessed, I really didn't expect the upgraded full house security system I had installed that very morning to come into use so quickly. But Gabriella didn't know about the new surveillance yet. I didn't immediately pull out my phone to check the footage. Instead, I leaned back on the sofa and quietly looked at my wife of 5 years. I wanted to test her one last time. Without any evidence, what would she choose? Believe this full of holes pretentious coquette actor, or believe me, her husband? "Gabriella." I interlaced my fingers, my tone as calm as if I were discussing the weather. "Do you believe it?" Emilio clearly hadn't expected that. In such a clear-cut crime scene, I could still remain this calm. By normal logic, I should have already exploded, defending myself and only digging myself deeper. But he reacted quickly and immediately shifted tactics, going for the retreat to advance approach. "Please don't blame Mr. Hugh." Emilio clutched his uninjured forehead, crying pitifully. "It was me who was careless and bumped into it myself. It has nothing to do with Mr. Hugh. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have come into the company. Shouldn't have affected your marriage. I'll leave tomorrow." Every word of his performance was perfectly crafted. On the surface, he was clearing my name, but in reality, every sentence was reinforcing the accusation that I had hit him. Gabriella stood frozen for a long time. She stared hard at Emilio on the ground, her expression shifting unpredictably. After a moment, she finally spoke, her voice slightly hoarse. "Did he really hit you?" Emilio froze. Something felt wrong. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Shouldn't she be rushing to help him up right now, and then slapping her husband across the face? What was happening? Still, he nodded quickly and continued his pitiful act. "Boss, please don't ask." Mr. Hugh just lost his temper for a moment. I don't blame him. Impossible. Gabriella suddenly frowned and cut him off. She looked at Emilio, then at me, her eyes flickering with intense conflict. No one else might do it, but he wouldn't. Gabriella shook her head, as if trying to convince herself, or resisting some invisible pressure. He's a professional boxing and combat instructor. He wouldn't attack someone like this. If he really did, you wouldn't still be sitting here talking, you'd already be unconscious. This doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. Suddenly, she clutched her head in pain, staggering slightly, as if her thoughts were collapsing into chaos. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with confusion and pain. Honey, I don't feel right. It feels like there's a fire burning inside me. I keep wanting to get angry, to yell at someone, but I don't even know why I'm angry. Seeing her desperately struggle against whatever absurd, plot-induced stupidity was trying to take over her mind, the frustration I'd been bottling up finally eased a little. It seemed the woman I'd loved for 5 years hadn't completely become a brainless puppet controlled by this ridiculous novel's plot. So, you haven't completely lost your mind. I stood up, helped her onto the sofa, then poured her a glass of warm water. Have some water first. Calm down. After making sure Gabriella was settled, I turned toward Emilio, who was sitting on the floor, completely dumbfounded. Done with your little act. I pulled out my phone, opened a home security app I'd downloaded earlier, and let out a cold laugh. This morning, I upgraded the entire home security and surveillance system. Full coverage, no blind spots, Ultra HD night vision with audio recording. It clearly captured exactly how you stepped backward, how you threw yourself into that shelf, and everything else. I turned the screen toward him, holding it right in front of his deathly pale face. On the display, his clumsy little self-harm performance was replaying on a loop like the pathetic clown act it was. The evidence was undeniable. Chapter 10. Seeing the ironclad evidence on the screen, Emilio completely broke down. His face turned deathly pale as he scrambled backward, desperately trying to retreat. As he watched me step closer, fear was written all over his eyes. No, that's impossible. Suddenly, like a madman, he grabbed his head with both hands and started screaming into empty space. System, what's going on? Why is the plot wrong? Why did he install surveillance? Why isn't Gabriella siding with me? At the word system, I raised a brow and stopped walking. So that was it. No wonder this bastard had been running around with that disgusting debuff aura. He really did have some kind of cheat. I smiled faintly and slowly rolled my wrist. My knuckles cracked sharply. A system? What are you talking about? I looked down at him, my tone cold and laced with mockery. I only see a mentally unstable man breaking into my home in the middle of the night, screaming nonsense. And when faced with a potential threat like this, self-defense is only reasonable. The moment I finished speaking, I moved. A clean, explosive strike. Bam. Emilio didn't even manage to scream. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed straight onto the shattered porcelain on the floor, unconscious. Police and an ambulance arrived shortly after. When Emilio woke up, he was still rambling hysterically. Failed mission, system save me, the storyline is collapsing. The doctors diagnosed him on the spot with severe psychological trauma and suspected acute psychosis. He was immediately taken away to a psychiatric hospital that very night. After that, the dense golden bullet comments I used to see never appeared again. The world finally became quiet. As for the secret of the bullet comments and the system, I of course never told anyone. Let it rot inside me forever. Late at night, the bedroom lights were dim. Gabriella curled up in my arms like a startled kitten, still trembling slightly. Thinking back on everything that had happened recently, she still felt lingering fear. Hubby, her voice was muffled against my chest. I've thought about it carefully. Every time I heard Emilio speak, or when he got close, my mind would slow down, like something was covering it. I'd also get this strange anger, like I couldn't control myself and would lash out at you. I'm sorry. She tightened her grip around my waist, tears soaking through my shirt. I almost lost you. I sighed and gently ran my hand through her hair. Even if it was something beyond control, some rules still needed to be set. The person you should apologize to isn't me. Gabriella looked up, eyes red, and nodded firmly. I know. Tomorrow I'll pick out some jewelry Mom likes, and buy some supplements too. Can you come back to the old house with me? I want to apologize properly, to Mom and to Isabella. Seeing that she had finally regained normal clarity and reason, I let out a soft chuckle and nodded. All right, my life should finally be back to normal. But after going through such an absurd farce, I still decided to visit the security company again tomorrow. I'd raise the security level at home and at the gym by another notch. After all, who knows what kind of bizarre, unexplainable nonsense this damn world might throw at me next.